agenda, which I was working on an older one, but it's pretty close. So, we'll make a couple of changes. We're going to hear next from Emergency Management, Mr. Thorpe, and then we'll jump back up when he's done with HR. And I'm not sure who all will be available there, but we'll make that take us up to lunch. And then we'll continue on in the afternoon then with the sheriff and the visitor group. And then towards the end, we'll have a lengthy, well, maybe it won't be lengthy, we'll have a discussion about how to balance a budget. So, Mr. Thorpe, can you hear us okay?
You bet. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine, so we'll turn it over to you and explain your budget if you would, and probably take a few questions, and we'll go from there. So, go right ahead.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Again, I'm Randy Thorpe. I'm the emergency manager for the county. I started this position in January this year, so I'm going on my 4th month. And just a little bit about emergency management. We're basically responsible for all the planning, organization, directing, evaluating the countywide emergency management program here. And a lot of that is developing policies, procedures, and documents that outline how we respond, who's responsible for what, and basically where we can go to get the necessary equipment and people to deal with any type of emergency within the county. The other big thing too is that work a lot with the local partners, and we have 2 extremely large volunteer groups in the county. One north based out of Nehalem Bay, and then one in the south. We also just this last year came up with a auxiliary communications group within the county. And what that group does is they're the ham operators within the county. And they're important again because in times of any type of emergency, communications, the normal communications could go down, cell phones, the normal radios, everything. So the ham operators are going to be the ones going to fill in that gap to help us keep the communications throughout the county up and running. So they are a fairly vital part during an emergency with the communications. The other thing that the emergency manager does here is that during any type of disaster, one of the first things we do is they call stand up. We basically open up the emergency operations center, which is located at the 911 center here in Tillamook. And with that, we bring in representatives from all the different agencies that are involved in the disaster with all different roles. And again, that's where we bring in our communication people to help make sure that our communications is where it should be. And again, right now, the emergency management has been moved out from under the Sheriff's Department into directly underneath the Board of Commissioners. And so I basically act as their representative and take care of the emergencies within the county. A little bit about historically, there's been 1.25 FTEs that are paid out of the emergency management budget. And with this, one of them was the emergency manager, the other one was Under Sheriff Kelly. And he is also, of course, a FTE in the sheriff's office. So there was these 2 positions there, and what the undersheriff did is he was the one that would fill in when Gordon, or the emergency manager at the time, was unavailable either because out of town or other commitments. So they were able to fill in behind and also do any additional help with that individual, with their emergency management in the county. So coming in, I just saw that, there was just the one FTE for emergency management. The other one was kind of shared with the Sheriff's Department with, like I say, emergency management paying a quarter of Under Sheriff Kelly's salary. And with these salaries, a little bit of history on that too is that the county gets a federal grant every year. It's called the Emergency Management Performance Grant. This grant basically will reimburse the county 50% of the cost of the personnel costs, which include both salary and benefits that are expended in emergency management within the county. But there is a cap. This year it was roughly about $67,000. So they will reimburse up to whatever the current amount is within that grant. And the other thing that I can see, again, if we decide to go with an additional 0.5 again in the future, is that this again would serve as my backup for when I'm either out of town or unavailable. Also, because of our large volunteer groups within our county, I think it may be important to have an individual that can assist with making sure that they're trained, that they're available, and kind of coordinate their efforts within the county, both during emergencies and also with additional training that they do within the communities with their CERT programs and the MRC program and a few other programs. So that may be another good option, that we do keep that 0.5 and keep it within the emergency management budget with that. Like I say, I mentioned that with our revenue, the biggest one again is the federal grant. Like I say, and that's used for only personal services. It used to cover supplies and maintenance and a few other things, but they cut it back to where it can only be used for personal services. The other large amount that we get around $9,000 from the McMinnville group, and it's basically has to do with the reservoir that's located there. The reasons why they give us money is because if that dam breaks, it will basically head down the Nestucca River, Nestucca River, and do some major flooding within that area. So they put up alert sirens up and down through the canyon along the river at strategic points, and there is maintenance that needs to be done on those sirens. And so we basically, as a county here in Tillamook, provide the maintenance on those sirens, and that's what that $9,200 is basically for. In the past, that maintenance has been done by John Spence in the IS department, and then there's just been a transfer from the emergency management budget to cover his expenses to keep those maintained. We also use that money for any type of educational use that we need to make sure that people along the river are aware of what the sirens are and what they need to do when those sirens are activated. The 911 center tests those sirens quarterly, and so that's their responsibility to accomplish that. I bring this up because we've never had a line item to pay for the maintenance of those sirens. And so what I have done is put in a $6,000 line item under the R&M equipment. Is where I was told to put that would be a good place. So I talked with John Spence, and he thought that looked like a reasonable amount of money to put in there for our maintenance on a yearly thing. So that is basically an increase in the line item budget, but we've always spent money to maintain those sirens, whether it come out of communications or the emergency management budget. But I feel that putting in a line item for emergency management would be the proper place to put that. The other main increase that I saw in the budget, if you go down to the bottom, is the miscellaneous material, services, and CERT. It's a $2,500 addition I put in there. And the reason why I put that in is that, again, we have some extremely large volunteer groups. We're starting up with the auxiliary communication group within the county. So I was looking at being able to maybe budget some money to assist those groups in carrying out their activities and increasing it. We're also looking at trying to get a good volunteer group in the central part of the county, and we could use some money there to do some advertising and set up some different activities to try to bring the excitement, I guess, of joining a volunteer group within the central part of the county. The other thing that, let's see, the other one that we added in was down to the bottom here trying to find it. I knew there was one more. Also looking at putting in some money for emergency communications. This was around $2,000. And again, that was put in there to try to make sure that our emergency communications within the county are where they need to be. And this again would help set up some additional resources to assist, especially with our ham operators, to make sure that we do have that coverage within the county that we need when everything else goes down. The other thing too is that there was a request put in for a vehicle for the emergency manager. Right now there is no vehicle. When historically with being in the sheriff's office, they had access to a sheriff's vehicle as an emergency management vehicle. So I'm looking at, in order for the emergency manager to have a vehicle, we would need to put that into the budget as a request as a new vehicle.
And the new vehicle's in Fund 131. This is the general fund department.
So with that, I think that's a little bit about the budget. Are there some questions or some more explanation that you would like to hear?
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple questions. The $28,000 for contracted services, is that where the repair and maintenance equipment, the $6,000 had been expended in prior years?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That 28,000 basically is, we have contracted, the county is contracted with United States Geological Survey people, the USGS. And what they do is they maintain the river gauges on the five different locations here in the county. And with those, why that is important is that we use those gauges, the river gauges, to predict potential flooding, and also watch the river levels to make sure that we can alert people when it starts to get to that point of need to provide action. And that's been an ongoing contract that we have with them to provide that service.
Okay. The most important service is it tells me when it's low enough to fish. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So back to the reservoir, and I know that's a good share of McMinnville's water supply. I'm assuming they pump because it's on this side of the crest of the mountains. They maintain their own pumps, I take it, and have access and all of that. So who actually goes up again? Would you say again, who does the sirens and maintains them? I'd like to hear that again.
Okay, I'm sorry. What they've done is we have a memorandum of understanding with them to cover the different expenses and maintaining the different items within the flood area on that. They have put in the sirens, and because they're basically in Tillamook County and a long ways away from them, they contract us to go up and maintain them. John has been going up, I think quarterly, to check just to make sure that they're operational and they look, that they're being maintained correctly. And then if there's any small maintenance that needs to be done, then we go ahead and absorb that cost. If there's some major repairs like replacement, again, that will go back to them and not through the county. So We are just providing the preventative maintenance basically upon those sirens, and John has kept that up for the last few years that I know of, and has that on his schedule to where he will stop by and check those sirens. I think there's 5 sirens within the flood area.
Is that memorandum of understanding evergreen, meaning it goes on indefinitely, or does it have an expiration date, or how does that work?
There is no expiration date on it. It's just it just continues on until one or the other party decides there needs to be any type of changes within it. We kept the same amount of money given to us for probably the last 10 years. So unless, our costs go up to maintain those, I wouldn't see a need to go in and adjust the amount that they're giving us, because that appears right now to be enough to cover the maintenance that John is doing. But there is no expiration date on that memorandum.
I haven't been up there for a while, but as I recall, it's an earthen dam.
Yes.
So has anybody, agency looked at that recently with regard to seismic stability, or, is it eroding, or is there anything? The reason I ask that is I live a couple hundred yards from the Nestucca. I'd be very interested if there's a wall of water coming my way, for one thing, but more importantly, has that dam been looked at along with many others by engineering people to say that it's indefinitely okay, or does it need attention, or do you know?
I'm not really sure the last time that was done. We do have their plan. I know that it was updated a few years ago to where I think the last big time is when they did some improvements and increased the capacity on it. But I'm not sure when the last time they actually, had someone come in and do that type of survey on the dam.
So if that were to be the case, that would be an appropriate expense for the city of McMinnville, then, correct?
Yes, it would. Like you say, we don't really have any responsibility for the dam here, and again, they put the sirens in because they know they're the ones that are going to be responsible if that dam breaks.
Are those sirens automatic, meaning if a water level comes to a certain height, then it triggers the alarm, or does someone actually have to flip a switch?
It's actually, who will set off the sirens will be our 911, and they will receive either radio communication or phone communication from people at the dam to say we need to trigger the sirens because of an impending break within that dam.
And do you know if this system is similar to the Trask River one, that's basically the same thing?
Yes, it is. It's extremely similar. The only difference there is on the Trask, they do all their own maintenance. And so we don't have any responsibility for those sirens to keep those maintained. What they do is they contracted with a company over here in this side, and they do the preventive maintenance and checking on the ones up on the Trask River.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
They thought about contracting with us, and what they've been doing is working, and so they're also looking at just keeping that. We're redoing that one on the Trask. It's 1998, and that was at their initiative that they wanted, because a lot of the wording doesn't make sense anymore of the way things are occurring right now, and so we're right in the middle of redoing that agreement, and both me and John Spence are the ones looking at it and making sure that the county's covered within that agreement with the one on the Trask.
So Randy, I know there's a reason, and I'm not sure you know this reason, there's a reason that we don't have tsunami sirens in Tillamook County. Because our siren system was extremely old. I was on the committee many years ago when we made the decision that even though we had newer used emergency sirens from Central Oregon, it just wasn't worth the cost. So I'm a little concerned concerned about how old these sirens are, and I like the fact that we can renegotiate this contract if maintenance of those sirens becomes more expensive, because one of the issues was we could no longer get parts for the sirens that we had up along the beach in Tillamook County. And the reason those were down is because we knew that if the big one hit, we tell people, hey, after 6 minutes, after you can stand up again, that's your sign to leave. You don't need a tsunami siren. Distant tsunamis, we have a plan in place to make sure people are warned. So the siren maintenance issue, we just need to be careful of those costs moving forward. Also, your emergency communications, and I know you've talked about this when I've been at meetings with you at South Tillamook County Emergency Volunteer Corps and places like that, and it's important. I do not see that, and it's a small amount, but I don't see that $2,000 in your budgeted line items, unless I'm missing it. And the last issue I want to discuss is funding from FEMA. I see that funding from FEMA is going down. I mean, there was a peak in 2021 of 84,413. Now we're down to 69,700. Do you have any indication what kind of funding streams we may be looking at in the future?
What I've gotten so far is that it's going to stay stable where it's at. A lot of that drop was because they stopped paying for anything other than the personal services, and that was the why there was a significant drop there a few years ago, was because they stopped paying for additional, like I say, for the equipment or supplies. So that's the last indication I've got. I've reached out to the gentleman that's over that grant to find out for sure what his ideas are. I'm also meeting with our regional representative with the state emergency management office this afternoon, and that's going to be one of the topics again, is looking and seeing long term, just not this year, but over the next 5 years, where that funding on that grant is going to be. But right now, the indication I have is it'll be very similar to what it is this year.
Perfect.
Last year.
And as you know, emergency management in Tillamook County is extremely important, as is evidenced by your first 3 months in Tillamook County.
Yes, that is definitely true.
But those were actually minor compared to some of the events that we've had. So emergency management in Tillamook County is extremely important.
Jared, one more question. And I'm looking at this year's actual cash receipts, and we have not received anything from the federal grants yet. When does that usually come in?
So I see that Randy had just sent me his request that he sent off.
Okay.
So there wasn't a request because we were in between.
Okay, because I know Gordon would send in their initial request, and we'd get that, and then if there was money left over, he would be at the table trying to get the additional funds.
And that's why the revenues fluctuated sometimes, is because there might be funds left over at the end, and
Yeah,
we've been able to obtain those.
okay.
They send out a memo about 3 or 4 weeks ago, just explaining that because of, again, shortage of people, they are running behind on reimbursement for that grant, and they're hoping to get caught up with it before next grant year. But they are still apologizing because of their shortage, that they're not able to get those funds out. And I just sent out the one for our third quarter for reimbursement on that now. So like I say, it looks like we're just, instead of getting a quarterly, we're just going to get one lump sum payment from them as soon as they get the staffing and get caught up. But at one time they said they had a 4-month backlog in payments due out from their various grants that they're administering.
And the same question with the reservoir reimbursement, we haven't received that yet. Do we need to bill them, or is that something that just comes through automatically?
I don't know. I can check with them and find out where that's at on that. I
final question is, our wages have gone up significantly in the last 10 years. Is that amount that's reimbursed enough to cover the wages for the maintenance we do on those sirens? I know it's minimal, but
No, it's, what's in the budget right now is, that's just, the department head, my salary there to cover that. And those are actually where, those are actual costs that'll be this year. If we add in the other, 0.25%, we're looking at, another, $20,000 to $30,000 in salary to add that back in.
So Randy, I think what he's asking is our agreement with McMinnville, if that hasn't increased, but if John's salary has increased over the last 10 years, is that being taken into account, and are we increasing that fee to McMinnville because John's salary has obviously gone up when he goes out and checks on those sirens in the dam?
That's the thing that I'm still working with John on, because I want to make sure that we are covered with that. And when I talked to him about just, pulling 6,000 off of that as a line item, he indicated that that should be enough for this year to cover his cost to do his preventative maintenance on them. But again, we'll watch through this year and see where we're at. So if we need to redo that contract the memorandum with, we'll definitely do that and put in an increase to help cover if John's costs do go up.
Great.
And Jeff, since John is now in your department, you sort of keep an eye on his expenses for this project.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I ask a question? Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, Randy, the purpose of that 0.25 was as a backup in part to the emergency manager, as you alluded to earlier. Do we have a plan for if you are out of the area or unable to respond for some reason? Do we have a backup? Are we working through this?
We're working through it right now. We kept Gordon on, and he's basically, I get a hold of him when I'm unavailable, and then he, knows that he's the one that's going to be contacted when I've been out of state here the last few months. And that's what we're looking at now is that how we want to continue with that, and basically who we want to put into that position. But we definitely are going to need to have someone that's going to be able to at least be a backup, whether that be another county employee or we go with a new hire on that. The only catch we have is that in order to backfill me, there's certain qualifications, training that individual has to have in order to fill that position. And that's a lot because of the funding that is being given to us by FEMA. And they require that the emergency manager have certain qualifications in order to act as an emergency manager. And so that would be the other thing that we need to look at. Of course, right now the board does have, all the qualifications necessary to do that.
So it seems like we need to put at least a holding place number in there for that backup before we finalize. Sorry, if you're gonna say.
I can address this. So I think we want to add the quarter-time position back in, and it's my fault that Randy submitted the one and I didn't catch it and we didn't talk about it, but I think we do need the quarter-time position back in. If we give it up, then we lose the funding. So OEM will pay for half of that quarter-time position. So if we give it up, we just lose that funding. And we can make good use of it. Randy was talking about earlier some of the ideas that we've kicked around are, for example, if we had somebody who could be trained, who could have all the, I don't remember what all the certifications are that are required for funding that, but somebody who could be certified to do that, who could act as his backup, but could also work with volunteers with the Emergency Volunteer Course. We could really make good use of that position. And what we've asked Eric Swanson to stand up an emergency management advisory committee, advisory to the commissioners, and he did this previously. We used to have one, and we can just bring it back to life. And to have the advisory committee, by the way, I'm going to hit you up to be on it. To have the advisory committee work with us to develop a strategic plan for emergency management, and have the advisory committee give us their suggestions or their feedback about how we can best use that quarter-time position. So I think we will want to add it back in, and we don't know exactly how we're going to use it yet, but we need coverage, and we want to figure out best and highest use of that time.
So I think I would make a recommendation here, since Under Sheriff Kelly has been doing this for a lot of years. I would think he would have the qualifications. And I can't see this, even though we're funding a quarter-time person here, honestly, I can't see many times when it would be necessary to have that quarter-time person activated. But with Under Sheriff, with Under Sheriff Kelly already in the county, doing his duties, I think it would help the sheriff's office at the same time. It's a little bit of additional funding, and in an emergency, I think Under Sheriff Kelly can handle those positions, those issues.
Under Sheriff Kelly can certainly fill in for the emergency manager, but Randy has talked to him and to Sheriff Brown, and Under Sheriff Kelly in no way is available to fulfill 2 hours a day, a quarter-time position, in no way. He would only be available to back up. And so we want to make full use of those funds in that time.
Yeah, but I can't see going out and hiring another person though. That's scary.
So the quarter-time position, that would be mostly, they wouldn't need all the certifications because you've got Sheriff Kelly as the backup. So you don't need to find somebody with all of those certifications. Would that person mostly be coordinating with the communities then for emergency management planning and moving forward? And is that the concept?
That's the idea. That's one of the ideas. And I guess we'll have to find out from OEM whether or not anyone who receives that funding has to have those certifications, because that's what I was thinking it meant, but maybe not.
Well, I think we have a great committee that will be meeting that can suss out the things, and we don't have to, thankfully, don't have to solve it here. But I think we would want to put a holding place in the budget for that. I think the other question that's been brought up in the community is specifically related to Gordon and whether we will pay to continue his weather forecast. And so I don't know if this is the space. I don't see that in here either. And I don't know if that's being considered as part of emergency management, or if we've made a determination to not continue that as part of the emergency management budget.
We haven't made the determination, and we want to work on it with that committee.
Perfect.
Because what we absolutely need are continued weather forecasts specific to flooding. And that's loud and clear. We hear from the community how important that is, and also how much of a change it's made since we started having regular emergency management weather updates, how much of a change it's made for people's flood readiness. And so we need that service, and we're not exactly sure how best to provide it.
So I will just stand up and, Randy, you've been doing some weather reports recently, and I appreciate that very much, coming out of the emergency management department. But I think that's part of your responsibilities also, to watch the floodgates and watch what they're predicting as far as river level rises, things of that nature. Again, I'm not sure we need an outside weather person when we can utilize all the services of the National Weather Service.
So here's a question, and it's a little bit of a departure from what we were just talking about. Going back to your line items, I notice you have fuel the same as you did in the current budget, and that's I think across the board as we've looked over the last couple of days. Nobody's paying what he or she was paying a year ago. And so is $2,000 enough, or should that be closer to $3,000? Or that's not a big item, but it's significant and probably should be accounted for. And nobody knows when the prices are going to go back, when or if.
Yeah, that would possibly, especially say if we do obtain a new vehicle, then that would go up. Right now there is no expense, so that could be it. I didn't think that far ahead. That I was just looking at past expenditures and not realizing that we may not have been using a vehicle as much as we will in the future of where that expense was coming out of the emergency management budget. With it being out of the sheriff's department, a lot of that fuel cost could have been absorbed by the sheriff's department and not, billed back to the emergency. Because I'm looking at past, and you're only looking at less than $1,000 over the last 2 years, 700 last year. So that can't be the total fuel cost for a vehicle.
No, that would have been the total fuel cost, because when they're vouchered, it's specific to the department.
Oh, okay.
So Randy, I know you've got a new vehicle in the budget, and I think I saw $60,000 or so. You just have to realize that we've got, how many vehicles in our
He
budget
obtained,
request?
those were to get me the documents when they were due.
Okay.
Randy was able to obtain a quote from Tillamook Motor for a Ranger. I think it was around 28,000 and change.
Okay.
So that it may say 60,000 in your,
Okay.
but it's 28 in Fund 131.
Okay. The other thing I was thinking though is that we have vehicles that are no longer serviceable to the sheriff's deputies, and I don't know if those are something that can be utilized afterwards. I don't know. I think we need to look at that also, because I'm not sure we're gonna have all the money for all the vehicles that are being requested either.
Yeah, and that's not a problem at all. I'm not aware of if, where that information is on any excess vehicles that could get us by over the next couple of years, but that's definitely a doable option for us.
Randy, I'd reach out to Matt Kelly. He'd probably have an idea of what they have on surplus or what they're looking to replace, and which vehicle may actually be worth
Yeah.
anything, because if you're just gonna turn around in that department and have to put $4,000 into a vehicle, it may be worth it to go out for the new one as opposed to
Yeah.
getting one from the sheriff's office.
Okay, I'll check with him and see if they are putting anything up on surplus this year.
I think the emergency manager needs a four-wheel drive to be able to get around in emergencies, and something dependable, of course. But Randy, are you currently charging us for mileage?
I have not yet. I haven't really put a lot on. I've got a couple of trainings that I need to go to that will need for me to put in for mileage reimbursement. But most of my travel's just been, short trips around, so it hasn't really been enough to, this time yet to bill back to the county.
Well, I know that you're out and about quite a bit as emergency manager, which you should be. So please start tracking that stuff, because if we can't afford to provide a vehicle for the position this year, we would at least have a year's worth of data about how much we're spending in mileage. Because if you're using your own vehicle for work-related expenses, we should be reimbursing you.
Okay, yeah, I'll do some really good tracking here
Thank you.
and keep that information for you.
And just so you know, county policy, we only reimburse back to 90 days. So if you haven't sent anything in, I would send something in as soon as you can.
Use it or lose it.
Mr. Chair, one comment. Is it time for the county to get one car, as a carpool car, a four-wheel drive for the commissioners to use and emergency management? The commissioner's car, we never use that much. If I remember of it, just kind of sits there.
We
So
got rid
maybe-
of it.
There is no
It
commissioner's
was
car?
Jen.
No.
We actually
Got
made,
rid of it.
we made money on it.
Did you want it, Bill?
No, it kind of had an odor to it.
Yeah, I did. Bill,
Well, I was
let
just
Bill do it,
thinking
we'll work
that
it.
a pool car for all the departments and to go grab when they needed to go somewhere might be more efficient than each department getting its own rig. Because emergency management, they're not gonna need it that much. And the commissioners, well, apparently you didn't need it at all, although I know Rachel and Isabel took that at times, but, maybe it's time just to, we'll take a quick look at that, just a thought.
You let me choose it, I think that's good.
Nope.
I think it should be electric too, while we're doing
Oh.
Well, I was gonna ask that. What's the
That's
county's
what
plan
makes
for electric?
Oh, yeah.
What's the county's plan for electric vehicles, or is there one?
You're looking at it.
My knowledge, there's
I
not
don't
one.
think we have one yet.
So does PUD have a plan?
Yes, there are two, and they were recently recalled by Chevrolet because of the battery incident. But yes, we have two, and the charging stations are popping up all over, and there's some rationale for it. I've driven one PUDs, and it's really cool. You can't hear anything, and they step on the throttle and it goes. And they have some other kinds of electronics and all, but there's three charging stations in front of PUD now, and they're free. You pull up, at least for the time being. And they're starting to pop up around, the last count I saw, there were like 30-some vehicles registered in Tillamook County, but it's growing. The state has set a threshold of like 50 or 60,000 by 2024 or something like that, and they're not even close. But there's progress being made, and the problem over here in this part of Oregon is if you do a round trip into Portland, you're right at the threshold of needing a charge somewhere online. And the same as it would be true to Salem, which is probably the two destinations where people would go. But it's something to think about for running around the county. There are some economies there, but then there's a certain amount of expense too, and you'd probably need a charging station somewhere like in front of the courthouse. But something to think about long term, and that
Yeah,
seems to
Ford
be-
makes a really nice, four-wheel drive pickup that's electric, but I think they're coming in about 70,000,
That's got three.
and you can't have one for the next 2 years, so.
Yeah, they're pretty far out. If you order one now, my understanding is you might be 18 months out or more, partly because.
Well, that's
of
what they
demand.
told me on a vehicle here. If I wanted the F-150s or larger, you can't even, the dealership says they can't even order them till next summer of 23. They can't even order them until then, so new vehicles are going to be pretty hard to get anyway.
Rachel, were you gonna say something about electric?
I was just gonna say that I was considering putting something in for the ARPA, but I just didn't have time to flush that out. But I think we should be looking at it. I think we should have a couple of vehicles, and we should look at transitioning our fleet, a lot of it to electric, I think. But
I agree.
there's just a lot of work to put into that.
So is it time to have a conversation with that leasing company? Wasn't it Enterprise?
Well, that was a
That's
while
across
ago.
the state
Yeah.
with different
good.
county and city organizations.
Yeah, I mean, if I think you would need to have interest in transitioning your fleet. Otherwise, it's working fine as is, and we still might not need that entity, but you three need to be behind that endeavor.
Okay, what else do we have for emergency management?
Hey, Randy,
Yes.
regarding McGuire Reservoir, when you find out how we get paid, if we need to invoice them or if they just pay us annually, will you also find out how often the reservoir is assessed? Because I asked this question previously, not of you, and I heard that, oh yeah, they check it regularly. Because the last time it failed was in 1963, so I have asked this question and heard that they check it regularly, but I'd be interested to know who checks it and how often, and if we can get the report.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely get that information.
Thank you.
You can do that on both Barney and McGuire.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah.
All right, anything else for emergency management? Thank you and welcome to Oregon.
Well, thank you. I heard that the sun does shine here occasionally, so.
That's an unfounded rumor.
Well, that's just to get you to move here, huh? Okay.
No, that's not the way that works either.
All right, thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's go down to HR now. We're back to them, I guess. Now, who do we have here?
Aaron
Simon?
Frost,
Aaron Frost.
Good.
HR Director.
Perfect.
Which is here, okay.
Yes.
Hi, Aaron.
Hello. So this is my first time at the budget committee hearing, so I'm here to answer whatever questions. I know Sean has some
So we budgeted for an HR director, but we've been using a contractor, Erin. It's great. Everybody loves her. Wish we could steal her, just so you know. So I kept the contracted services at what it was budgeted last year, and I left the HR director in hopes that we actually will be able to find one next year. If we don't, then I'll do a line item transfer it to the contracted services to cover the expenses. So I left the person in the personnel expenses, knowing that if we don't find anybody, I will have those funds available to transfer down to contracted services and to cover the cost based on what we spent this year on contracted services for HRN.
Okay.
So, just a cost comparison, so versus, using a contracted service versus hiring an HR director that we've had in the past, are the costs similar? for the department?
I think the contracted services is a little bit more, and it's also having the access to the director on a daily basis, because we're not HRN's only client. We're not the, Erin works with others, so, and she's busy.
Well, it's not, the contract side would not be 40 hours a week necessarily, or would it? Not at all.
No.
More by project, by project, by project.
I think Erin can speak to that.
Part of
Yeah, and, you know, I think it's a little, maybe slightly more than what we originally talked about when Naomi was, transitioning out. And one of the, just kind of structurally thinking about what makes sense longer term, you know, looking at the volatility of the labor markets, maybe slightly slowing down just anecdotally, and, you know, going out sometime after the wage study is complete for another recruitment, or looking at options for, which we've discussed in the past, a higher level, like an HR manager position that might be more, it might open the labor pool a little bit more than a director level position. So those are some thoughts, certainly, you know, that I would propose, and that would offset some of the contracted service, well, much of the contracted services.
Yes.
One of the beauties of working with Erin and HR Annie that our citizen members may not be aware of is that they have a wealth of resources. So we've been able to get leadership training through HR Annie for county leaders. We've been able to get the wage study finally. Not finally to you, but finally, you know, because year after year we talk about it, and so HRN is actually doing it. And they have a leave specialist, and they have a recruitment specialist, and so we have a wealth of resources available to us through HRN that we haven't had through an employee. So that's been really, really nice.
So
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Bell. I should have mentioned earlier as well, for those of you who don't know, so I do work alongside an HR generalist, Heather Wall, who's an HR Annie employee as well. And so the contracted services include not only a director, outsourced director, but also an HR generalist who does all of the leaves administration. She's been instrumental in the COVID, tracking. And then also, she has been the lead on the compensation analysis.
So where are we with that? Every year this seems to come up, and it sounds like not a lot of progress is being made for one reason or another. Where is a comprehensive study? And I know the comp committee now meets, the three of us, I think in about 2 weeks or towards the end of April. And we'll look, but that's for elected officials. But the bigger picture that evolved over the last couple of years was the entire organization. Maybe not represented employees, but everybody else. And so where is the county with that? And I think we're going to have a discussion this afternoon about all the vacancies and, what do we do about salaries and benefits and all that to compete with what's going on in the world. You can't run this organization, we can, but it won't be run very efficiently with 15 or 20 openings, and it sounds like there's a lot of them. So where is the formal study that might move this forward?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. We've spent a lot of work kind that we are very close to the end. Our last meeting was last week with Commissioner Bell, Sean, and our labor attorney to review initial recommendations. So not only have we created the gathered the market information, but we've also developed, and Sean's been instrumental in this as well, but developed pay tables accordingly that we would recommend to the county. So, and to answer your question or to speak to what you shared about the number of openings, we know that openings are taking longer to fill, and in comparison, the turnover rate is not exceptionally high. It's the time to fill those open positions that's creating the challenges for staff and for leadership. So, while pay and benefits are certainly a factor in that, I will just go on my soapbox for a second and just say it's not the only factor. Developing an engaged team and creating a place where people want to come to work is just as impactful, if not more so. So that's kind of on the flip end. There's a lot of my time spent educating and working with managers and teaching folks how to, hopefully create those work environments that people want to be in.
And so, Aaron, just for the edification of the three lay members of this committee who may not be familiar with exactly what you're working on right now and ready to release, can you just go over that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just share with you kind of a general overview of what we did. So in the past, the county has looked at population as being the basis for selecting comparator counties. So 50 up, 50 down was historically used. We created a weighted system where we looked at multiple factors in addition to population, cost of living, cost of housing, geographic location to really assess who those true comparators are. And we applied that to every county within the state, not just the 50 up, 50 down. And so what that got us is it pulled in a few more counties that haven't historically been considered comparators for Tillamook. And so I think that gives maybe a little bit more of a holistic preview of who those comparators are. So that was a lot of time on the front end. Once we determined that, we presented that to the board, that was approved. And then we embarked on our collection of the data where we benchmarked with various counties. We do have a little bit of an advantage, myself and Heather, in that we work really closely with the county on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of my time is spent with departments reviewing job descriptions, updating job descriptions, talking to them about what are their staff doing, what is the work that's being performed. So we have kind of an insight into that, whereas an outside agency might not have as much insight. And so we're actually able to look at, we're able to understand, what is an apples to apples comparison when you're looking at different positions within different counties, because job descriptions don't always tell the whole, job titles don't always tell the whole story. So spent a lot of time doing that, built out a wage structure accordingly. One of the steps that we took was to drop the highest and the lowest, so those outlier positions, to try to get a true comparator, and then that information was presented back to the treasurer, to Commissioner Bell, she's the liaison for HR, and to Stephen Schuback, the labor attorney. So, and then Sean and I worked together to build out some pay tables. Sean did most of the work on that, and then our next step is to bring it to a board briefing for discussion and overview, and then the county can decide based on the information that's presented what direction that they want to take.
And so again, Aaron, this is a small subset of county employees. So again, can you tell us what subset of county employees this is? And then if indeed we want to move forward with a county-wide study, can you give us an idea of how long that's going to take?
Yeah, so this is good question. So this is for the executive service and the non-represented positions. I believe we had close to 53 last time I checked. And so that takes into account Compensation Board April 26th. I believe it's April 26th. So in a couple weeks. And then the proposal, I believe the county has accepted the proposal that we put forth to do take the same approach with AFSCME. So AFSCME would be the next group of employees that we would review, and that aligns pretty nicely with the bargaining timeframe. So this current contract ends June 2023. We would likely start talks about, initial meetings and things like that towards the end of this calendar year. And as soon as we're done with the non-represented and elected executive service study, we can begin on the AFSCME study with the goal of completion. I would say quarter one of 2023.
And Aaron, and I know this is confidential, you sent me an exit interview with someone from the sheriff's office, and again, you sent it to me, so you've read it. Their main complaint, I think, was really about wages and all. So the Teamsters also, we just finished the labor contract, and we did, but what I'm hearing anyway, out of people that are leaving our sheriff's office is it's about pay. So I'm concerned that we may not get to a Teamsters study for another couple of years, and our sheriff's office is in desperate straits right now. They are. So I'm just concerned how long this is all taking, and I don't know where we go from here. I just don't.
I share your same concerns, and definitely feel for the folks at the sheriff's office. I guess maybe a little bit of a silver lining is part of the non-represented wage study that we're almost complete, pretty much complete with, includes sergeant, lieutenant, undersheriff, and sheriff. It does not account for Teamsters. The Teamsters just went through their own kind of smaller wage study. I would propose that this next round of bargaining with Teamsters, the county looks at doing something similar for Teamsters positions as well.
Thank you, Aaron.
So Aaron, you just said that as part of the Teamsters negotiations that just concluded, there was an internal wage and comp study. And it wasn't a comprehensive one like the one you're doing, but there was one done by Teamsters or by our labor attorney. So when will our employees have they already seen those raises, or when will they have already?
Yeah, they've already seen the incentives increase that were bargained, the one time for not doing retro, and the wage increase. They've already seen that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? In the sheriff's department, who's in the Teamsters? Is this just the rank and file officers, or?
Yeah.
All of the sheriff's offices in Teamsters.
No.
Well,
Not
except for the
Sergeants, lieutenant, undersheriff, sheriff are not Teamsters. They're management, yes.
Right.
So,
Question. Oh, go ahead.
oh, I asked another question. On the budget, it looks like we got 4 full-time positions in HR. I understand the director's vacant. Are
Yes.
the other 3 positions full right now? Or?
They are full. Aaron has a really good staff that has been treading water for a couple of years now. The 3 in there take care of the retirement, when people are leaving, exit interviews, all the benefits, and the recruiting. And
So we are looking, county's looking to eventually have a full-time HR director here in Tulsa, correct?
or something similar, yeah, as Aaron mentioned, and manager.
This is not a permanent situation, is what I'm getting at.
Not unless we can get Aaron away from HR Annie.
Okay. So you
That
have
was
a
my
point.
question. Are we better off using HR Annie permanently and not getting a director?
I think we have to consider that.
I think that needs to be a primary consideration, because the
Well-
whole time I was a county commissioner, we were not getting nearly this kind of quality.
Then I'll send HR your way when they come down to my office, so that I don't have that on my plate anymore.
We are getting better HR services than we have since
Yeah.
I've been in office, and I would venture to guess that it's been some time before that.
It's not gay.
Yeah, And has worked really well with our two unions and our, how do I want to say this, our communications between the unions and HR and the county have improved.
So if we had a manager in there, not a director, a manager that could still work with the HR Annie and take that off of your shoulders, would that be a solution?
Well, it depends on what the qualifications are of the manager. Would I still want them to reach out to some of the classes and teachings that HR Annie's been providing? That's been great, like Mary Faith has said. I think CIS also has some of those things that we haven't been utilizing too.
I'm just saying, I think this seems to be working.
I agree. I think it is working. And if we had an HR manager or generalist in the office, I think Erin mentioned this at the beginning of her talk, then she could still act as director, but right now she's doing a lot of basic stuff that could be handled by a generalist, because we don't have an HR generalist.
And so would it be wise to adjust the budget in that way and begin recruiting for a generalist at this point?
If we move it from a director to a generalist, that's just moving the wages down the line.
I'm
Yeah, I
just
think-
saying, if that's the direction we're going, are we ready to go that direction? And Erin, maybe that's a question for you, or are we not quite there yet?
I think finalizing the current comp study, I think would be the next step, and then going out for a recruitment. And we can talk about what those requirements would look like, and what the pay range would need to look like to recruit somebody of a quality caliber that you're looking for.
And so what is the timeline? You say you're almost ready to present to a board briefing the study that you have done. Is that almost like see you next week, or almost like see you 2 months? Do we have a timeline on that?
Yeah, we can, Sean is probably the person I want to talk to. I know she's been so busy. Yeah, probably in the next week or so, depending on everyone's availability and timeline. And
I wish you could see
we're
Sean's
there.
face
We're ready.
right now. I wish you could have seen Sean's face when you said that. It didn't look like she was all in with that, yeah.
I've been working on it as I can to come up with the numbers and what it's going to cost. It's over 50 some people, then you have to plug it into these to try and figure out what the increase is going to be. So I've been working on it as I can. It's in progress, but I'm here, and I can't work on my computer because my computer's
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I was just asking because we had touched on this in I think in a prior conversation here.
Yeah.
That are we putting some money into that revenue stabilization fund or into an operating contingency based on the draft that you all have been working on that might make us able to implement this, since currently we're looking at approving all of the budgets without the benefit of the completed study. So, and I think you had said, ask me that when Erin's here, so I was asking again while Erin was here.
I think we can safely say we'll have we'll have an answer in the May.
Okay, perfect.
And so then you'll need to be making some decisions then.
So what will you have for the comp committee when we meet in 2 weeks? And that's mainly elected officials, but that will be like we've seen in the past, meaning that other comparable counties and elected positions to the extent you can actually find something comparable.
So we did a little bit differently this year. So it took the same approach that we did with the non-represented, where we pulled in every county within the state and then applied the variety of different categories, applied the weighted factors to each, and came up with a new subset of comparable counties. So in the past, I think it was more of a we'll follow kind of cost of living. What we're proposing is a market rate adjustment similar to what we are proposing for the non-represented and elected, executive service positions.
And Aaron, does that take into account the compression issue that will come up as a result of market rate adjustments for the non-represented?
Yeah, so yes, and in some cases, we even pulled subsets of departments where there's multiple layers. It's more of a hierarchical structure, and so we pulled those into separate tables so that you could see exactly that. You could see where compression is occurring, and where we would want to make those increases,
Great.
or where we'd recommend those increases.
Thank you.
Other questions for Aaron?
One thing I have wondered since I've been in office is if we could, what is in place and what we can do to have some kind of fund in HR for employee morale building, employee engagement activities. Like, we haven't been able to have a Christmas party for a couple of years because of COVID, but could we have a summer party for employees? You know, what I think there hasn't been a lot in that fund previously, but what can we do this year? I'm looking at Sean.
Great ideas, a great idea. It always comes down to, we wind up getting complaints from somebody that couldn't attend it, or why are these people, this office is allowed to leave for 2 hours for a lunch.
I don't want to not do it for that reason, though.
I know, but that seems to be the big things we always.
And all the morale building that you hope to do with it gets
Crashing
blown
down.
out of the water, it's crashing down.
I mean,
Well-
the best thing I can say is I can reach out to other counties and see how they're doing it. Because if other counties have unions and multiple unions and they're able to do it, why we haven't? What are they doing right that we haven't been able to do in the past? So that would, I would.
My
Like to- I can reach
experience
out.
too has been it falls on a few people to do it. And
Yeah.
It usually was the treasurer's office that got the brunt of the Christmas party and got the brunt, and so if you're going to do that, you almost have to have a designated staff person to put that together out of HR or somewhat place. And I don't know what the solution is,
Yeah.
but I do know it was one heck of a nightmare for the commissioners of the complaints that come in and the union going. It was a mess.
Well, I know that there have been complaints because we had a couple of gatherings before COVID, and I know there were complaints because I heard them. But I also, there were people who were really happy about it.
Yeah.
We had a committee, we had an events committee. Jeff was instrumental in the events committee, and I'm volunteering right now. And it was, you know, that last Christmas party we had was outstanding, and everybody
It was a good
said so.
party.
Like, this was the best thing, and we had one out at the Bradley K. Webster Shelter at Barview Jetty, and that was really great. And so I think we can do something, and there will always be a certain number of people who complain, always. But there were a lot of people who were really, you know, it built morale. It was nice.
And maybe we do a general party and then a separate one for like the health department where they have appointments made and scheduling and everything else.
Sure.
I guess I shouldn't say
Yeah.
we. You guys can.
Yeah, I think
Step
it's a
right
good
in.
idea.
You could volunteer with us, I'm sure, and be that coordinator.
Thanks, Bill, that's really
That was
nice.
nice of you to offer.
What have I done? But I agree that we needed to do that. My years as a commissioner, it seemed like less and less, and it was because it was so hard to pull it off, and it was hard on the staff that were trying to do it.
Okay, what other questions might we have regarding the budget for HR? Sounds like there's an immense amount of work in progress, some of it to be delivered rather quickly, so good. That's a step forward. It's for my part on this, it's been a little frustrating over the years. I remember when David Butler was on this committee and we spent considerable time talking about how do you solve this problem in an organization, and you know, it seems like it never took a step forward, but I think maybe we're doing a little better now.
It was a big chunk of my time as a commissioner. We were waiting for the comp study,
Yeah,
and that's been retired almost 2 years now.
and then hopefully it will be informative enough and flexible enough that it won't be out of date in 90 days and put on the shelf. But it's a place to start. Okay, anything else? Thank you very much. I did have one question. You know, later today, we're going to have some kind of a discussion here and give some direction to the county treasurer. And I think it's going to involve personnel or positions and salaries and wages. Would you be available, you know, around 2 or 3 o'clock when we get to that point, if we notified you?
Yes, I have a few other appointments, but yes, if I know in advance, I can
Okay,
wiggle it
well,
into my schedule.
We'll see where it goes. I just have a hunch we're gonna have to talk about this in some fashion, how we provide for it, even if we don't have all the numbers.
Okay,
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, I think our lunch has arrived, so it looks like on the schedule, we're actually gonna take a little bit longer, and the sheriff will be in at 1 o'clock. That's where we are.
Yes.
Okay, so let's adjourn and recess until